Good evening. This is Faye D'Souza. Thank you for joining in. These are conversations we have with domain experts who can help us understand issues better. Now, remember, we divide the conversations or the content we put up on this YouTube channel into three large blocks. One is the news that we give you every night at 9 o'clock with no opinion whatsoever. Two is our conversations with experts. Remember, on these discussions, we only invite those people who either have an academic or a professional qualification to comment on this subject. We don't invite anybody else. So there's nobody actually flinging opinions at us. These are qualified voices helping us understand the issue. And finally, interviews from people who have lived experience. The idea is to be able to empower you as audience to be able to make up your mind and not to manipulate your feelings and tell you to be scared or angry or upset about anything, but just to help you understand things better. Today, we're going to talk about the third wave. Now, if you look at the caption at the bottom of this video, I've said very carefully, are we prepared for the third wave? I have not said, are we prepared for a third wave? Because it seems like the third wave might not be far away. Let me tell you why I'm pointing this out. Now, the state of Kerala in the first wave and the second wave have sort of been like a canary in the coal mines, right? It has always shown spikes in the numbers before Maharashtra and then Delhi and then the rest of the country. The state of Kerala is showing a spike again. Now, this is what the numbers are. Kerala's active caseload jumped 12,000 in the last 10 days. Its overall death toll has doubled in the last 2 months. So on the 16th of May, Kerala's total death toll was 6,339. On the 16th of June, it was 11,509. Also, you'll remember all of these wonderful photographs that we're now seeing of Manali and all of the other hill stations where people are walking around without their masks. In most of our cities, people are walking around without their masks. We have doctors now saying again that we need to wear our masks and we need to behave like we know better because we should know better for the third time round. And it all sounds like deja vu because we've been through all of this. Now, one of the questions we're going to be asking Dr. Shahid Jameel, who joins us, and Neelakantan is the third wave now imminent? Is it around the corner? But the other thing that we have to talk about is the vaccines, right? So we have a new health minister as of today. We have the government that has tweaked and turned and pitted the vaccine policy over and over again. But let's take a look at the numbers, right? In order to be fully prepared for a third wave, India needs to vaccinate about 60% of its population of 1.3 billion people. Now, apparently, that works out to about 8.6 million doses per day. What are we doing right now? We're doing about 3.5 to 3.9 million doses a day. So we're falling short every day. And this works like a required run rate in a cricket match. So every day that we fall short, the required run rate keeps going up and becomes even more difficult for us to catch up to. So that's where we are right now. Now, remember, Tamil Nadu, Delhi, Rajasthan, Maharashtra have all complained that they're running out of doses and they're not getting enough from the central government. What has the central government said in the middle of its cabinet reshuffle? They have said states and union territories will be told well in advance how much they're getting in terms of doses. They need to plan their COVID vaccination sessions based on the availability of vaccines. Now, this is the statement that's come out of the health ministry. And I'm like, boss, the third wave is not planning based on your availability, right? So we seriously still have an availability problem. So these are the questions that we're asking today. Are we really ready? Joining us this evening, Dr. Shahid Jameel, who is a very respected virologist who's advised the government in waves 1 and 2. Murali, Neelakantan, principal lawyer, and Amicus, former executive director, Glenmark Pharmaceuticals. Remember, I also want to point out that COVAX, which is the UN's distribution of vaccines to poorer countries, has given Moderna vaccines to Pakistan and Bangladesh, but India hasn't got any because we haven't completed our paperwork. So there's also, and this is why Murali is here, because there's so much work to be done on the global stage, and we haven't gotten around to doing it. Gentlemen, good evening, and thank you for joining us. Dr. Jameel, you first. By your calculation, and I know that you're looking at this closely, how far away is the third wave?
Well, unfortunately, I will not be able to give you a date for the third wave or a third wave, whatever it is. As far as I can see, the third wave depends on three factors. The first factor is, of course, individual behavior, how we behave in the unlock period, whether we wear our masks or not, whether we maintain distance, whether we crowd markets, all of that. And as you yourself said, none of that is happening. The second thing is our rate of vaccination. Unfortunately, that's falling short as well. And if you see the amount of vaccination that we have done, so for example, in every state, if we see how many people are eligible to receive vaccines and how many have received vaccines, the overall India figure is only about 30%. 30% of those eligible to receive a vaccine have received one dose. Now, that's clearly not sufficient at this point. And thirdly, a third wave will depend upon whether a more infectious variant emerges and spreads. So the third point is really something that we have little control over. We can have some control through vaccination and through individual behavior. If we reduce transmission, we reduce the possibility of new variants emerging. But we have to understand that the new variants must be much more infectious than Delta, which we have gone through. And let me just say that Delta Plus doesn't appear to be that. Okay.
So, that was going to be my follow-up question, Doc. You said last week, you were quoted saying we do not have enough data on the Delta Plus variant to make any sort of conclusion on whether or not it's more dangerous or more, more transmissible. Is that clearer now? Can we say conclusively it's not more dangerous?
Yeah, so as time goes on and Delta Plus is not jumping off the charts, it's getting clear. Remember, when Delta emerged, between January and March, it became very prominent. And from March to May, it just went off the charts. We're not seeing that happen. Totally in the world, there are about 600 identified cases world over. In India, we have about 50, although in the public domain, India has submitted only 18 sequences. So it doesn't look like, it's transmitting very efficiently. Maybe it's because those districts have, people are paying more attention to those, whatever may be the reasons. But it's not jumping off the charts. But I think vaccination is the key. And unfortunately, we are falling short on vaccination.
So, Mohit, thank you so much for the 20 rupees that you've contributed to us. Picking up from where Dr. Jameel said, vaccination is the key. Let me bring in Murali. Murali has been part of so many conversations on vaccination on this channel, and you can take a look at them. They're very educative, and you'll understand the process, the legal process much better. Murali, first question. We know that COVAX, which is the global, vaccination program where countries, first world countries are now donating to make sure everybody has vaccines, has made sure that Pakistan and Bangladesh have received Moderna, but we haven't yet. We understand that's because India has not completed some legal process, liability, indemnification agreements are not done, and that's holding up our, our process. Is that true? Is that your understanding as well?
It seems to be what the government's telling us. So I have no other private sources telling me any better. But if it is true, then it's just tragic. We could have dealt with this issue in August last year when VK Paul was in charge of procuring vaccines. He and his team was in charge of procuring vaccines. This is not a new issue for us. It's been on the table for a year now. All the other countries in the world have agreed to this deal that COVAX has signed. The deal simply is this. COVAX will give us vaccines and will provide insurance cover for those who are injured by the vaccines. That's the deal. Now, what more we want to negotiate really befuddles me. here are the vaccines. Here is an insurance company standing behind any injury to pay compensation. What are we quibbling over now? It's been a year. I can't understand it.
So we've had several changes now to the vaccine policy, but there's been very little improvement on the ground in terms of supply of vaccines. And I find it hilarious and also almost offensive to our intelligence that the central government is telling state governments, we'll tell you in advance what the supply will be. Plan your vaccine drives accordingly. Because again, these are not tickets to a Metallica concert, right? It's not about, listen, we'll only give you 50 tickets to make sure only 50 people show up. This is about getting as many people vaccinated as possible. So is there still a fundamental sort of misunderstanding on how this should work?
Yes, there is. And the misunderstanding, again, has been in existence for a very long time. The center seems to suggest to the people that the states are not vaccinating enough. And that seems to be the messaging all the time. And if you see the newspapers every day there is an update saying the states and the union territories have 1.6 million doses available with them. So the messaging seems to be that there is lying around and the states are being lazy in vaccination. Whereas the reality is, if you try and book a slot on CoWIN, you won't get one. So anybody who's watching, please get onto CoWIN now, put in your PIN code and see if you can get a slot. I have tried. When I had to get my second dose, it was a complete nightmare. So there are no vaccines on the ground. Even paid ones are not available. So that's the reality on the ground here. If you want to go back and see why we are in this situation, the story is very simple. As of the end of June, India has only ordered 80 crore vaccine doses. So when the rest of the world ordered 3 times their population, the doses for 3 times the size of their population, we have ordered for a third of our requirement. So that's the beginning of the problem. We don't have vaccines because we never ordered them. It's not like you get onto Zomato or Swiggy and order food and it arrives in 40 minutes. These things take time. And for the scale of vaccines, the doses we need and the quantities we need, we just are still refusing to order what we need. So if we need, let's say, to vaccinate 1.3 billion people, as the government says it will, then we need twice those doses. So the math is very clear. Unfortunately, we're between a third and a fourth of what we need, and we're still not planning ahead. So we don't know what we will get in August because all the orders for vaccines for until July have been done, but we haven't ordered anything for August, September, October, November. So we're going to be waiting for that to happen. And therefore, you have a situation where we don't have enough vaccines. So the problem is not distribution. As we know, we can actually get almost 1 crore a day done, as was demonstrated on that one day where we broke the world record, that we can actually distribute that quickly. Therefore, the challenge is we don't have enough. And it's squarely a problem of the government, the union government, not ordering enough vaccines.
I want to bring in Dr. Jameel here. Dr. Jameel, for me also personally, I've gotten 1 dose. I'm waiting for my next dose. And there is this massive 16-week gap on COVID that I have to maintain between 2 doses, which is why I can't get my second dose. Now, we also had 3 core members of the National Technical Advisory Group on Immunization saying that they had never recommended such a wide gap. They had actually agreed to 6 to 8 weeks, going up to, and the government announced the 16-week gap. Now, the question that I'm not going to ask you to comment on the politics, but does this put us at any sort of risk at all if we have a gap that is perhaps based on reports, not what the panel members or the doctors ordered?
Well, I will not get into what the panel members said or what they didn't say. But if you look at the real world data on vaccine-induced protection, that is coming now. And now we have data available from UK. There are at least 4 studies. There's data from Israel, there's data from Canada, and there are 2 sets of data from India, from CMC Vellore and from the Tamil Nadu Police Department. And all of this suggests that even one dose of vaccine gives at least 70% protection from severe disease and hospitalization. It is a reality that the number of doses available there's a shortage. That's the reality. So I think this decision to extend is based on a combination of factors. One being that single dose also gives you 70% protection from severe disease. And second is that the supply is not enough. And when supply will be enough, I think it will go back to 8 weeks, 8 to 12 weeks. So that's the reality of the situation. Now, coming back to an earlier point, you talked about COVAX and Moderna and Pfizer. Moderna and Pfizer together through the COVAX program will only supply about 3 to 4 million doses to India. That's one day's vaccination even today. It's not going to make much of a difference. So to think that if India didn't order from COVAX in time, we are losing out on something. We are not. I think we need to really, the point that Murali was making, give orders to our vaccine companies that can supply much more to us. Remember, one production cycle of Covaxin takes about 4 months. If you're not giving them an order today, how will they plan over the next 4 months? That's the real key issue here. The third point is that we have very good efficacy in phase 3 from the DNA vaccine. That is a vaccine that has also been tested on 12 to 18-year-olds. Can we please get on with it and make sure that that vaccine comes through? At least it can be given to 12 to 18-year-olds. This is a vaccine that doesn't require injections. It is delivered through a injection-free technology. Perfect for children. So let's just get on with it.
Look, also the Covaxin data of its phase 3 trials that still have not been made public or peer reviewed. Do you see a challenge in the fact that this has taken this long?
No, the Covaxin data has been published in a preprint. No, wait a minute. It's a press release, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
we know
I
that
often
the
get
data has
confused.
not been peer reviewed. Yes, they've just announced their efficacy. We have to take their word for it.
Right. They've just announced it. No, I mean it's in the interest of Bharat Biotech. It's in the interest of AIIMS. It's in everybody's interest to put it out. No, I'm actually confused. I think the preprint is already out.
Some of it is out, Doc. Yeah.
Yes, it is out. Yes, it is out.
We don't have all of it, but we have some data that has been put out.
No, what has been published? I'll tell you. What has been published on the 30th of June in medRxiv is a paper that talks about the phase 3 data for Covaxin. Yes, it is out. It is in the public domain. Yes.
So, would you say that, would you agree with the fact that what India needs to do right now is to place massive orders to both of our manufacturers, which is what we know at least of Bharat Biotech and of Serum Institute, saying make the 1.3 billion doses that we need?
No, absolutely. I mean, there is no other way out. That seems to be the bottleneck here. We have vaccine manufacturers who can make enough vaccines, and we don't have to wait for COVAX to give us vaccines, but we have to give them orders.
And we've done, we've done a little bit about it. So we've paid some money to BioE to block, but we've not purchased. So we're blocking capacity. It's like buying an option. So we've done that to them. I don't know what we've done to Zydus, which is the one that Doc was talking about. So again, if only the government would place these orders and tell us that they've got orders for this, rather than put out press releases saying or file an affidavit saying, this is what we are projecting. And then every time they have to revise the projection, then make excuses saying that was optimistic, this was realistic, that was an estimate.
No, the world is aspirational.
I'm sorry, aspirational. Doc, I'm not very good with these things. I've never been in government. So, just tell us the facts. We've placed orders for so much. This is what the delivery schedule is, and this is the money that we've paid. I mean, it's quite simple, actually. So if only they would tell us that, then the states would know when to plan and how to plan it. It's not as simple as saying we will just allocate to each of the hospitals on a pro rata basis. I think all the scientists have told us before that how the states allocate to wards, to districts, has to be scientifically done. You have to think about where the cases are, how to deal with it, and vaccination needs to be done that way. You just can't say, here are 10 hospitals, each of you, will get 2 a day. That just doesn't work. So unless the union government is able to provide these schedules, the delivery schedules and quantities, which it will only get from the manufacturers if it places orders. So which is going back to the same thing. Most of our problems today are because we haven't ordered, we don't have supply schedules, so we can't plan vaccinations. And we can't target populations because we don't know how many vaccines we'll have. So the issue just keeps going back to the same thing. We're not ordering vaccines.
So, Murali, we had ICMR Chief Balram Bhargava say the third wave is not a challenge for India. Do you agree with him?
It has never been a challenge for India, right? The second wave wasn't a challenge. The first wave wasn't a challenge. People die or don't die. As somebody said, one of the ruling MPs says, people die and that's the end of it. So that seems to be the approach. Every high court in this country is still dealing with, do we have enough oxygen? Do we have enough drugs? It's just not in the newspapers anymore, and it's not making headline news. But every high court in this country, every day, has a case coming up, which has been going on for months now, saying, okay, what are we doing about oxygen? Why is this drug not available? Why are there hospital beds not available? So the problem hasn't gone away on the ground. It has disappeared from TV newsrooms. That's all has happened. So by that logic, the second wave is still on. It hasn't tapered off. People are still dying. We still can't get beds. We still can't get oxygen. It's just not making news. In the same way, I guess the third wave will come when it comes. And unless people cover it in the press, the government can say that it doesn't exist and it's not a challenge anymore. But I don't see what's changed between last month and this month. What has changed in the way we're prepared for it? As far as what's been told to court goes, nothing much has changed. The courts are monitoring this every day, and nothing from the union government to the courts tells us that we have more supplies of drugs, we have more beds, we have more oxygen, we're prepared better. Nothing in the courts I haven't seen any affidavit, I haven't seen anything filed in any of the high courts which says that we're prepared.
Murali, we have a new health minister as of this morning.
Yeah.
Are you expecting changes in the way this problem is being handled? A, do you see this as the government acknowledging that there was mishandling, which is why there's been a change? Do you expect that to be different starting today?
If the government sacking a minister or the minister resigning means that there is going to be change, I think, we're in a different country. That's not how this government functions. I'm only relying on the statements made to the court, where the government said this was being managed at the highest level. And I assume the highest level in our form of government is the PMO. So it is not the health minister who was handling it. All the press conferences and announcements have been made by a person other than the health minister. All key decisions regarding policy have been announced by the PMO. Everything that is happened since. Speaking to that policy has been run by Dr. Paul of Niti Aayog or Dr. Guleria of ICMR. So I don't see the health minister being party to any of this. So to blame the health minister would be like just asking someone to take a fall for them. Now, will the new health minister have anything to say? I hope he does, because since the Prime Minister's speech on 21st of June, we've had 3 changes to the policy already. They haven't been announced, but they have already been implemented. So I don't know what more can be done. I mean, we can keep changing the policy every week, twice a week, I don't know, once a day. I don't know what more we can do. But the new minister can come up with another policy and another policy and another policy. I don't think there is a dearth of policy. The issue is very simple: making announcements and fiddling on the edges with what we're going to do with distribution, which are the 3 changes that have been made in the last 2 weeks since the Prime Minister spoke on TV to the nation. So they're still fiddling around with, shall we give the hospitals 8,000 a day, 3,000 a day? How do we compute that? How does that hospital or each hospital get the orders to the state government? Does it give it to the central government? Does it give it to the manufacturer? Who will pay what? We still haven't worked any of that out. So the issue is not about who is going to be the health minister, although I suspect that from what this minister has said in the past, we're going to have entire health sciences here. He's spoken about Ayurveda and homeopathy and a lot of those things. So I suspect that, we have now entire health sciences degree holder being the health minister. I hope it helps the country, but I'm not really that optimistic. If only a minister could change the course of the pandemic, I'd be a very happy man.
Dr. Jameel, if you were to, and you did say in your first answer, you said, I cannot put a date on the possibility of a 3rd wave or the 3rd wave. But if you were to put down a priority list for government right now between oxygen and beds and vaccines and genome sequencing and what needs to be done immediately, right now, what would that be?
Vaccinate at scale. That would be priority number 1. Keep hospital systems ready. Although I must say that this is possibly a rare occasion where I will defend Dr. Balram Bhargava. And I'll tell you the reason. The reason is that possibly upwards of 60% of India is already exposed, which means that we will largely be protected from severe disease and mortality. We may have another surge in cases. And if you have been following the situation in Britain,
yes,
Britain is on the rise, and the rate of rise now is the same as the rate of rise in the previous wave in Britain. But if you look at the rate of rise of hospitalization and the rate of rise of mortality, that's not there. What's the reason? The reason is that upwards of 60% people in Britain have received at least 1 dose of vaccine. So vaccinate, and for God's sake, get some good estimates of how many people in this country have been exposed. We don't have a sero survey that will reflect what happened after the 2nd wave. That will give us some fairly good estimates for people to model and come up with answers to questions that you're asking. Right now, we are completely flying blind. We're just making guesstimates here and there. There's always a danger to making those guesses without any data.
Well, the ICMR had announced that it will begin the 4th round of sero survey starting June across the country in 70 districts. Right. So I suppose we could wait for those results. But
my information is that it hasn't started yet, but it is in the planning stages and it will start soon.
So you said vaccinate at scale, get the hospital systems ready, and conduct sero surveys. Is that your 3rd point that needs to be done?
I would say sero surveys are important to tell us how many people have been exposed. And that's very important. You're obviously not going to not give vaccines to people who have been exposed, because that includes another set of logistics which we don't want to deal with. This is the time to really make vaccines freely available to everyone. Forget private, forget public. Vaccines have shown time and again, earlier as well as during this pandemic, that wherever vaccination rates are high, we have had less disease. And that's what we are worried about, disease. We're not worried about getting infected. It's disease that's the problem.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for spending time with me this evening and answering all of our questions. So there is now a checklist that Dr. Jameel has put out. Hopefully someone in government is listening. I always end these shows saying, hopefully someone in government is listening. We also upload that clip on Twitter of that list that Dr. Jameel gave us, which is vaccinate at scale, get your hospital systems ready, and conduct sero surveys to find out how many people in the country have already been exposed. That is really important, of course, in being able to plan ahead for any new wave or any number of waves that might come, because that will help us understand where we stand as a country. Thank you both for answering those questions. For our viewers, if you have more questions, give us comments and in this video, and we'll try and ask our specialists to come back and answer those questions for you. In the meantime, don't revenge travel. Stay home and stay safe. The news is up at 9 o'clock. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.